it's a really strange feeling, opening a drawer you haven't looked in for years.
Oh, yeah. Like a junk drawer.
Yeah, exactly. You're pushing past all the tangled charging cables and, dead smartwatches, and then you find an antique mechanical pocket watch.
Right.
You pick it up, and it's heavy, it's cold in your hand.
It has actual weight to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wind it, and suddenly you feel this distinct rhythmic ticking right against your palm.
It's a completely different sensation.
It really is. I mean, it doesn't track your heart rate. It doesn't ping you with breaking news or, daily outrage.
All algorithms.
Right? No invisible algorithms. It runs on brass gears and springs and just pure craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And reading the Chesterton Radio original story, the last newspaper, it feels exactly like finding that pocket watch.
In a world just overflowing with digital noise.
Exactly. It just operates on a completely different set of mechanics. So that is exactly what we're going to do today on this deep dive.
We're taking the watch apart.
We are. We are going to dismantle this story gear by gear to understand how it ticks.
And, I think it's a necessary dismantling.
How so?
Because on its surface, a story about a small-town newspaper shutting down might sound like, I don't know, an exercise in pure nostalgia.
Sure, yeah. Just pining for the good old days.
Right. But when you actually look at the machinery of this narrative, you realize it is doing something much more sophisticated.
It really is.
It's posing this fundamental question about how we retain our humanity in an era defined by artificial intelligence and fleeting social media feeds.
And the vanishing of local physical institutions?
Exactly. It's an invitation to slow down and actually remember.
So, as if we are broadcasting right from the warm, crackling fireplace inside the little station on Commercial Street here in Atchison, Kansas, we are going to dive deep into this.
Pull up a chair.
Grab some coffee. But before we pull off the back of the watch, we need to issue a very clear warning.
Oh, yes. Major spoilers ahead.
Yes. If you are listening to this right now and you haven't read the last newspaper yet, please pause this deep dive.
Go read it first.
Head over to chestertonradio.substack.com, read it, and then come right back to the fire.
Because we are going to discuss the ending, the turning points.
The hidden archives, all of it. So consider yourself officially warned.
And honestly, it really is a story you want to experience firsthand before we start, analyzing the thematic engines that make it work.
I completely agree. Speaking of those engines, I got to be honest here.
Yeah.
When I first read this piece, I found myself getting surprisingly emotional over, of all things, an old printing press.
And a stubborn small-town editor.
Right. I mean, the mechanics of this story, the craftsmanship, the loyalty, the memory, it just feels so out of step with our modern world of clickbait.
It's almost jarring.
It is. I actually almost felt a little defensive reading it at first, like, well, why should I care about a dying medium?
Sure.
But by the end, it completely won me over. Where do we even start to unpack the underlying machinery of a story like this?
Well, I think we have to start with a cinematic legacy that essentially serves as the blueprint for this kind of narrative.
Okay, lay it on me.
We need to talk about Frank Capra.
Of course.
If you want to understand the last newspaper, you really have to understand why the films of Frank Capra movies like It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Meet John Doe.
Mr. Deeds Goes to Town.
Yes. Why they still resonate so profoundly nearly a century after they were made, during the Great Depression and World War II.
It's funny you bring up Capra because his name has almost become like an adjective at this point.
Capra-esque.
Exactly. People casually call things Capra-esque, usually meaning something is just heartwarming or maybe a little overly sentimental.
Right. They kind of dismiss it as just sweet.
Yeah, but there's actual structural theory behind what makes something Capra-esque, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. The film historian Richard Griffith actually coined a brilliant term for Capra's recurring protagonist.
What was it?
He called this archetype the Messianic Innocent.
The Messianic Innocent. Okay, break that down for me.
So think about the context of the 1930s. The country is reeling from the Great Depression. People are losing their homes.
The Dust Bowl, the soup lines.
Exactly. And there's this massive consolidation of wealth and power happening. People just feel incredibly small.
Right.
Into this environment, Capra introduces a very specific type of hero. This character is usually an ordinary, somewhat naive person who suddenly finds themselves pitted against these forces of entrenched greed or political corruption or just cynical bureaucracy.
Like Mr. Smith going to Washington and facing a corrupt political machine.
Exactly. Or Longfellow Deeds inheriting a fortune and having to face those cynical lawyers who just want to exploit him.
So the innocent part is their absolute lack of cynicism.
Yes,
And the messianic part is that they are essentially trying to save something bigger than themselves.
precisely. But here is the crucial mechanical difference in a Capra story.
Okay.
The hero's inexperience often defeats them strategically.
Oh, interesting.
They lose the court case, they get framed, they are driven to the absolute brink of despair.
Right. George Bailey on the bridge.
Exactly. But their gallant integrity, their absolute refusal to compromise their basic decency, calls upon the goodwill of the little people.
The ordinary citizens.
Yes, it's not the superhero who saves the day in a Capra film. It's the combined, quiet protest of everyday neighbors who are just inspired by the hero's integrity.
Wow. Yeah.
Capra defined this mythic America where individual courage, paired with social responsibility, triumphs over systemic evil.
I see exactly how that maps onto Atchison and the last newspaper.
Right.
I mean, Ben Mercer, the editor, who has been at the Chronicle for 43 years, and Charlie Nguyen, the pressman.
Pressman who talks to his Heidelberg printing press like it's a living, breathing entity.
Yes. They are the absolute embodiment of that Capraesque dignity.
They really are.
They aren't politicians. They aren't titans of industry. They are just ordinary people trying to do a humble job with integrity.
While a distant corporate bureaucracy just decides to pull the plug on their town's history.
And what the author of the last newspaper does so well, I think, is carry that Capra tradition into the 21st century.
Totally. It doesn't just mimic the plots of those old black and white films.
No, it inherits their philosophical core. Capra's films often featured a protagonist who was tempted to leave their small life for something grander.
But ultimately realized the profound value of staying put.
Okay, wait. This is where I want to push back a little bit,
Let's hear it.
or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
Because it is so incredibly easy in the modern era to view staying in your hometown as, well, a failure of ambition.
Oh, absolutely.
The cultural narrative we were all fed today is you grow up, you get out, you go to the big city, you become a personal brand, you scale your impact, right?
It's a hustle culture.
Exactly. So look at Ben Mercer. He's sinking with a bankrupt ship.
Yeah.
The printing contract went to Nebraska just to save pennies.
Yeah.
The chain stores killed downtown.
Yeah, it's bleak.
Why isn't Ben just suffering from the sunk cost fallacy? Why should we romanticize his refusal to leave?
That is the exact tension the story relies on. And, it's the same tension people completely misunderstand about. It's a wonderful life.
Okay, how so?
Modern audiences often look at George Bailey, a guy who never gets to leave Bedford Falls to build skyscrapers or travel the world, and they think he's a tragic figure.
I've heard people say that.
They argue he's trapped by guilt, that his town just parasitically feeds on his inability to say no.
Right.
But that is a fundamentally flawed reading of the film's philosophy. George Bailey wasn't trapped by guilt. He was anchored by vocation.
Anchored by vocation. That is a massive distinction.
It is.
The sunk cost fallacy is about ego, right? It's about not wanting to admit you wasted time.
Right.
But vocation is about purpose.
Exactly. Vocation implies a calling that actually serves others. Ben Mercer spent 43 years at the Chronicle.
I love how the text describes that.
Yes. The text says the first 22 passed quickly, the next 20 passed without asking permission.
And the last year, he refused to move at all.
Ben isn't trapped in Atchison by a lack of ambition. He is anchored by a deep sense of duty to his town's memory.
Which is so rare now.
When a society values only hypermobility and constant disruption, permanence actually becomes a radical act of rebellion.
That is so true. And that anchors the whole Capra ideal that one individual holding the line can actually save a town.
Yes.
You mentioned Meet John Doe earlier. How does the mechanism of that film mirror what Ben Mercer does in his final edition of the paper?
Well, in Capra's 1941 film Meet John Doe, a journalist named Ann Mitchell gets fired.
Okay.
In retaliation, she prints a fake letter from a fictional unemployed man named John Doe.
Right.
And in this letter, John Doe threatens to jump off City Hall on Christmas Eve to protest the miserable state of civilization.
Literally the ultimate clickbait before the internet even existed.
Completely.
Yeah.
But the letter accidentally sparks this massive nationwide grassroots movement.
Oh, wow.
Ordinary people start forming these John Doe clubs dedicated simply to being better neighbors to each other.
Just from a fake letter.
Yes. And the mechanism in the last newspaper is remarkably similar, but it's actually inverted for our time.
It strips away the cynicism.
Exactly. Ben Mercer, facing the actual death of his real newspaper, looks like the depressing, cynical final headline he drafted.
Was it presses fall silent?
Yes, presses fall silent. and he tears it up.
And instead, he prints a single, honest question. Who quietly changed your life?
Right. And just like in Meet John Doe, that one act of honest journalistic vulnerability sparks a real-life outpouring of community gratitude.
It isn't a fake letter.
No, it's a genuine plea to remember, and the phones just start ringing off the hook with stories of ordinary miracles.
So if Capra shows us the power of the individual staying put and maintaining their integrity, what does an entire town of people staying put and noticing each other actually look like?
That's a great question.
Because I think that brings us to the second major thematic engine of this deep dive, which is the philosophy of G.K. Chesterton.
Ah, yes, Chesterton.
Both Capra and Chesterton saw the exact same thing, didn't they?
Hi.
They saw ordinary life as inherently extraordinary.
They really did. Chesterton championed what we might call the romance of the everyday.
I love that phrase.
He believed that the most radical, thrilling thing a person could do was to simply look at their own family, their own street, their own town, and realize it is entirely unique and just bursting with wonder.
Right.
And his philosophy pulses very quietly but very firmly throughout the last newspaper.
Specifically through the concept of subsidiarity, right?
Yes, subsidiarity is key here.
Okay, I have heard that term thrown around in sociological and political circles, usually tied to Catholic social teaching.
Sure.
But what does it actually mean in practice? Like, how does subsidiarity work on a mechanical level in a town like Atchison?
Well, at its core, subsidiarity is the organizing principle that matters ought to be handled by the smallest, lowest, or least centralized competent authority. Political decisions should be taken at a local level, if possible, rather than by some massive central authority. But psychologically and sociologically, it's really about proximity.
Meaning you care more about what's close to you.
It's deeper than just caring, honestly. It's about competence and nuance.
Nuance.
Think about it. A distant centralized bureaucracy, say, a national news conglomerate or a federal agency, looks at a small town and they only see statistics.
They see data points.
Exactly. They see median income, voting demographics, click-through rates, but the people who actually live there see the nuance.
Right.
They know why the local foundry is struggling or why that one intersection on 4th Street always floods.
Yeah.
When the Chronicle covers a local school play or a livestock auction, that is subsidiarity in action.
I see.
It's the profound belief that the local community is the most competent authority to record and manage its own history.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the difference between a national headline that says, Midwest experiences severe winter storm,
Right.
and a local paper that highlights the teenager who shoveled a widow's walk without being asked.
Exactly. Chesterton wrote extensively about these ordinary miracles. When Ben asks the town who changed their lives, the answers aren't about billionaires swooping in with massive grants.
No.
The answers are deeply local. It's a teacher keeping a clean shirt in her classroom for a 7th grader whose family doesn't have a washing machine.
Wow.
It's a bus driver waiting every single winter morning until a disabled child safely reaches the porch.
Those are the exact types of everyday romances Chesterton defended.
Beautifully said.
But, reading the story, I kept feeling this underlying sense of dread.
A sense of loss.
Yeah, because there is a dark side to this, a real threat that both Chesterton and this story warn against. Our sources actually brought up a deep dive Chesterton Radio previously did on Chesterton's 1904 novel, The Napoleon of Notting Hill.
Oh, that's a fascinating comparison.
They drew this incredible contrast between George Orwell's vision of a dystopian future and Chesterton's vision.
That contrast is vital to understanding what Ben and Charlie are fighting against.
Break it down for us.
So if you look at Orwell's 1984, the dystopia is characterized by, as he put it, a boot stamping on a human face forever.
Right. It's built on overt fear.
Physical pain, aggressive totalitarian control. Big Brother is watching you.
But Chesterton imagined something completely different.
He imagined a society conquered not by fear, but by comfortable indifference.
Comfortable indifference.
Yes. In The Napoleon of Notting Hill, Chesterton presents a future London that is so perfectly safe, so relentlessly rational, and so sterilized of risk that the citizens simply stop caring.
They just give up.
They lose their local patriotism. They coast on this comfortable gray plateau of apathy. No one fights because nothing is deemed worth fighting for.
And that is exactly what is killing Atchison in the last newspaper.
Exactly.
The threat isn't a dictator burning the newspapers in the town square.
No, it's a slow fade.
It's the fact that people simply stop subscribing because they are comfortably scrolling on their phones.
Yep.
It's the frictionless convenience of the chain stores out on the highway, killing the quirky, locally owned hardware store right downtown.
Ben and Charlie are fighting on the front lines against that exact apathy. By choosing to meticulously record and remember the history of their town, they are actually committing an act of rebellion.
Against a society that simply wants them to comfortably fade away.
Yes.
Joy is a weapon of resistance.
That is so Chestertonian.
It really is. It reminds me of his essay collection, All Things Considered, where he vigorously defends the joy of spontaneous, authentic experience over modern snobbery.
Oh, he hated the idea that you have to be solemn and cynical to be considered important or intellectual.
Exactly. So when Ben Mercer is staring at that final headline, "Presses fall silent,"
Right.
he realizes that printing it is essentially surrendering to despair.
It's giving in to the snobbery of inevitable decline. It's saying, well, we lost, let's just turn off the lights.
But by changing the headline to ask the town to remember acts of kindness, he is using gratitude as a weapon against that cynicism.
It's brilliant. Because anyone can be a cynic.
Right.
It takes zero effort, literally 0 calories, to point out that a newspaper is going bankrupt and the world is falling apart.
The easiest thing in the world.
But it takes immense moral imagination to use your dying breath as an institution to say, before something good disappears, it ought to be thanked.
I love that.
Hmm.
And that transition from the philosophical to the physical brings us to the actual mechanism that records and preserves this authentic experience.
The local newspaper itself.
Exactly. We have to examine what happens to a civilization when that specific mechanism breaks down.
And we really need to ground this in some reality because the crisis in community journalism isn't just a plot device.
No, it's a staggering real-world issue.
I know people might be listening to this right now thinking, why do we need a physical paper? I have a community Facebook group. I get local alerts on my phone.
It's a very common defense today.
It is. But the data tells a deeply troubling story about what those digital replacements actually do to a community.
Okay, let's look at the data.
Let's look at the work of political scientist Robert D. Putnam, specifically his landmark book, Bowling Alone.
Yes.
Putnam tracked the generational decline in civic engagement in America over several decades.
Right. He looked at things like voting rates, union membership, attendance at PTA meetings, and famously...
Participation in bowling leagues.
Exactly. Hence the title.
Exactly. He was measuring social capital, which is the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society, enabling that society to function effectively.
Social capital.
Right. And one of the most critical metrics he found was that the loss of local community papers leads directly to a loss of what he called belongingness.
Belongingness.
He found that older generations, who derived a profound sense of belonging from reading their local newspapers, engaged with their communities at more than twice the rate of younger generations who were just getting fragmented, nationalized news.
Wow. So what is the actual mechanism there? Like, how does a physical newspaper create social capital in a way a Facebook group doesn't?
Well, think about how a Facebook group works. It is algorithmically sorted to show you what you already agree with, or, more likely, what will make you angry enough to engage.
Right.
It is entirely frictionless and highly curated to you. A local newspaper, however, is a shared baseline of reality.
A shared baseline.
It forces you to encounter the whole town. You might buy the paper just for the sports section, but to get there, you have to physically turn past the city council minutes, the obituaries, and the school honor roll.
That makes me think of the town square metaphor.
Yes, exactly.
How does a physical town square actually function? It forces people who might not even like each other to physically share space.
Right?
You have to navigate around your neighbor. You have to see them as a human being. A local printed newspaper does the exact same thing conceptually.
It creates a boundary.
It says these are the people inside this boundary, and you are tied to them.
And Stephen Whitaker's letter in the story says it perfectly. A newspaper dies when a town forgets that its people belong to one another.
That line is incredible.
If you aren't reading about the local zoning dispute, or who just had a baby, or the high school play, you start to view your neighbors merely as obstacles in traffic rather than as fellow citizens.
And you know, the journalism industry actually has this incredibly dismissive term for this kind of reporting.
What is it?
They call them chicken dinner stories.
Ah, right. Chicken dinner stories.
The idea being that covering a local church potluck or a high school car wash is somehow beneath the dignity of real journalism.
Which should only focus on national politics or major scandals.
Exactly. But I love the quote from Leo Lerner, the founder of Chicago's Lerner newspapers.
What did he say?
He used to tell his reporters, "A fist fight on Clark Street is more important to our readers than a war in Europe."
It sounds almost isolationist at first,
It does.
but it's actually a profound statement about human psychology.
Right.
The fist fight on Clark Street affects the reality you walk out into every single day.
It affects the safety of your children.
Yes, the trust in your local police, the social fabric of your immediate surroundings. Community journalism creates usness.
Busness.
When we read the last newspaper, we realize the Chronicle isn't merely distributing information. It is functioning like a parish bulletin or a local radio station or a family photo album.
It is the communal memory.
Exactly.
And here is where the story throws a massive curveball. And I gotta say, it's my absolute favorite part of the narrative.
Oh, I know where you're going.
The author introduces a brilliant paradox regarding this communal memory. The most fascinating element of the entire story isn't what the newspaper printed over its 118-year history.
No.
It's what they explicitly chose not to print.
The hidden archive room in the basement.
Yes. Ben goes down into this room labeled with floods, schools, churches, war letters, and he finds a green ledger from 1933.
Such a great scene.
Talk to me about the mechanics of this ledger scene. What is actually happening here?
Well, Ben reads this ledger and discovers that during the height of the Great Depression, a group of townspeople quietly pooled their money to save a local foundry from going under.
Okay.
They paid off the debts, they saved the jobs of their neighbors, but they demanded absolute anonymity.
Right.
They swore the newspaper editor at the time to absolute secrecy.
Why is that specific choice secrecy over publication so crucial to the story's thesis?
Because it proves that the ultimate value of the Chronicle lay in its restraint, not just its reach.
Restraint.
By hiding the story, the paper preserved the humility of the givers and the dignity of the receivers.
That is so powerful.
Think about the sociological impact of that. The men whose jobs were saved at the foundry didn't have to walk down Commercial Street feeling like public charity cases.
Right. They could hold their heads up.
Exactly. They didn't have to avert their eyes when they passed the people who bailed them out. The newspaper absorbed the secret to maintain the social equilibrium of the town.
It makes you ask a really provocative question, honestly. Is a newspaper's true value in the ink it prints on the page, or in the secrets it keeps in the dark?
Oh, that's good.
The Chronicle acts almost like a confessional booth for the town of Atchison.
It really does.
It is a sacred trust. The currency they are trading in isn't information, it's memory itself. And sometimes, the most honorable way to handle memory is to protect it from the spotlight.
And that tension is exactly what drives the climax of the story.
Tell me about it.
Ben Mercer holds this ledger. He knows that if he publishes the names of the people who saved the foundry in 1933, it will be a national sensation.
It's the ultimate feel-good story.
Right. Descendants will buy copies, regional television will show up, the paper might even get a massive influx of cash and be saved from bankruptcy entirely.
It has immense commercial value.
Exactly.
So he could literally save the physical institution of the newspaper if he betrays the spiritual institution of the newspaper.
Yes, and that transition from the philosophical implications of journalism to the actual construction of the narrative brings us to the literary craft of the story itself. Right.
The author built this emotional resonance into the text through an incredibly tight structural framework.
Okay, let's walk through that structure. How does the author build this pressure cooker of emotion?
It follows a classic, highly effective narrative arc.
Okay.
The inciting incident is the impending closure of the paper. We start in media res with Ben drafting the final depressing front page.
Right. The mood is just heavy, cynical, and resigned.
Very much so. Then we hit the first major turning point. Maggie, the longtime assistant, finds the letter from the old editor, Stephen Whitaker.
Which leads them to discover the hidden archive room.
Yes. And the sensory details when they enter that room are so incredibly specific. The text notes that everything in the room was placed, not thrown.
Placed, not thrown.
Yes, the reverence of that space sets the tone for the midpoint, which is Ben reading the 1933 Green Ledger.
Okay.
In storytelling terms, the midpoint is where the protagonist's understanding of the world fundamentally shifts.
This is where the story pivots from being about a failing business to being about the town's hidden moral architecture. Ben realizes the town is held up by invisible pillars of grace that the newspaper has silently guarded for decades.
Which rockets us toward the climax, right? Ben's conversation with Walter, the hardware clerk.
Yes, because Walter's grandmother was one of those secret donors in 1933.
That scene is it's a masterclass in quiet tension.
It really is.
Ben approaches Walter and essentially asks if he should print the story to save the paper.
And Walter says, "My grandmother was a proud woman. If she gave something away and asked nobody to know, I don't suppose I'm entitled to make her famous."
That line hits so hard.
Because it forces Ben to make a definitive choice. It is the moment Ben realizes that exploiting the town's goodness for profit, even to save a beloved institution, would destroy the very thing that makes the town good.
He chooses the dignity of the dead over the survival of his business.
Exactly. This leads directly to him tearing up the depressing front page and replacing it with the question, who quietly changed your life?
And then we get the emotional payoff. The phone's ringing. The stories pouring in.
The bus driver, the veterinarian, the man in Omaha remembering his 7th grade teacher.
It all cascades to the resolution. Ben turning off the lamp in the archive, realizing that the town's memory will continue, even if the physical medium of the newspaper changes.
But you know what makes that structure work so well?
What?
It isn't just the plotting. It's the pacing and the scene construction. The author grounds incredibly high-minded philosophy Capra's ideals, Chesterton's subsidiarity, and the dirt, brick, and humidity of the Midwest.
The sensory details are what I remember most, honestly.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the cold October morning.
Yes.
The mist off the Missouri River. You see Evelyn Hart turning the open sign at the cafe.
And Charlene Wyand's chipped World's Best Grandpa cup resting on the massive Heidelberg press.
Oh, I love that detail. You can literally smell the warm ink and the ozone in the press room. Why are those details so vital? Like, why not just focus on the big ideas?
Because they tell the listener, they tell you, this isn't an abstract fable occurring in a vacuum. This is real life.
Right.
It validates Chesterton's idea that the ordinary is where the divine operates. If the setting felt magical or ethereal, the themes just wouldn't resonate.
It would feel like a fairy tale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By making the setting smell like old coffee and machine oil, the author makes the moral choices feel grounded and achievable.
And notice the emotional rhythm of the dialogue. It's so sparse, it's incredibly Midwestern.
Very Midwestern.
People aren't giving these long Shakespearean monologues about duty. I laughed out loud when Maggie Collins brought in the coffee and just said, black, no sugar, no joy.
It says so much with so little.
Yeah.
Or Walter taking off his apron and folding it along the crease made by years of use. Let's just look at that specific visual detail, folding the apron along a worn crease.
Okay.
That one sentence communicates decades of blue-collar craftsmanship, quiet, repetitive labor, and a life lived with order and humility.
Wow.
These small, quiet moments carry enormous emotional weight. They prove that you do not need Hollywood spectacle when you have true storytelling craftsmanship.
It perfectly sets up this recurring motif throughout the story, which is essentially things that stay versus things that blow away.
Oh, absolutely.
At the very beginning, Ben watches autumn leaves skittering past the door, blowing away toward the river.
Yeah.
But the leaves are immediately contrasted with the people of Atchison, who stay in one place so long they become part of the architecture of the town itself.
That motif is really the central metaphor for the entire deep dive we are doing today.
How so?
Think about the difference between a fleeting, algorithm-driven social media feed and a printed, physical newspaper archive.
The digital feed is explicitly designed to blow away.
Yes.
It is designed to induce amnesia. You scroll, you get a hit of dopamine or outrage, and literally a second later, it's gone, replaced by the next piece of content.
It trains us to forget.
But the printed archive is designed to stay. It is an anchor. It has physical weight, like the pocket watch we talked about at the beginning.
And as we move into the final themes of the story, we have to recognize that the last newspaper isn't meant to be just passively consumed like a piece of digital content.
No, not at all.
It is designed to prompt active reflection in you, the listener, much like the final edition of the Chronicle prompted the town of Atchison to reflect.
It's a story that demands you look up from your screen and look at your own street. We could list off a dozen themes the story touches on. Legacy, stewardship, memory, vocation, family.
Right.
But I want to zero in on one specific theme that really struck me, and that is forgiveness.
Oh, forgiveness.
And how the story portrays forgiveness not as a grand religious event, but as a quiet economic transaction.
You're thinking of the mechanic who ignores the unpaid bill?
Yes. During the climax, when the phones are ringing, one of the stories that comes in is about a local mechanic who consistently forgot to send a bill to a struggling single mother whose car kept breaking down. Let's deep dive into that for a second. In a hyper-capitalist framework, that mechanic is a bad businessman. He is losing money. But in the framework of a community, What is he actually doing?
He is absorbing a loss to maintain the social fabric. It goes right back to the Foundry in 1933.
Explain that.
Forgiveness in a small town often looks like carrying someone else's economic burden so they don't lose their dignity.
Right.
The mechanic knows the single mother needs the car to get to work to feed her kids. If he bills her, she defaults, she loses the car, she loses the job. The community has to step in anyway through social services, and the woman's pride is shattered.
The domino effect.
Exactly. By quote-unquote forgetting the bill, he allows her to keep her dignity and her livelihood. It's an act of profound grace disguised as forgetfulness.
And the only reason the town finds out about it is because Ben Mercer asked the right question.
Right.
Which means the history of American journalism, the philosophy of Chesterton, the cinematic legacy of Capra, none of it matters if it doesn't actually change how we interact with our own neighbors.
The story demands application.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's slow down for a second. Imagine we really are sitting here with a cup of coffee by the fire in the little station, the mist rising off the Missouri River outside the window.
It's a good picture.
I want to ask you, yes, you, listening to this right now, a few questions to mull over in your own life.
Go ahead.
Think about your own physical community. What institutions in your own town quietly hold your community together? Is it a diner where the owner knows everyone's order? A volunteer fire department? A local library that refuses to close its doors?
Who has been your local hero?
Yes, the person who doesn't have a bronze plaque, but who showed up when you were in trouble and asked for nothing in return?
Exactly.
If your hometown newspaper or whatever local hub you have left disappeared tomorrow, what memories, what vital connections would disappear with it?
That's the scary part.
And maybe most importantly, what ordinary place changed your life?
Those are the exact questions the Chronicle left with the town of Atchison.
You really are.
And they are the questions Chesterton Radio is leaving with us. Because the ultimate challenge of the story is one of transition.
Just as the Chronicle found a new vocation shifting from being a daily printer of news to becoming a public collection of memory, you are being challenged to become a walking archive for your own community.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is. If the institutions fail, if the local paper shuts down, if the digital feeds become too toxic and disjointed, the responsibility of memory falls to us.
We have to be the ones who remember what others would quietly let disappear.
We have to be the ones who keep the ledgers.
That is a deeply hopeful reflection on why stories like The Last Newspaper still matter. They preserve civilization.
They really do.
And they do it not by pointing to flawless superheroes or distant political saviors, but by reminding us that ordinary people often become extraordinary simply by remaining faithful to their vocation.
Beautiful.
They do their jobs, they fold their aprons along the crease, they fix the cars, they love their neighbors, they keep the record.
And that ties this entire discussion back to the core mission of Chesterton Radio itself: preserving stories, encouraging wonder, and building community.
Absolutely.
Right outside the windows of the little station here in Atchison, the Amelia Earhart Festival is actually happening.
Oh, wow.
It's a celebration of a woman from this very town who fought against the gravity of the mundane. She took to the sky, just as G.K. Chesterton took to the imagination, refusing to let the world lose its sense of wonder.
And Chesterton Radio operates on that exact same frequency. It is an attempt to build a sanctuary for these kinds of stories in a digital age.
So we invite you to become part of the Chesterton Radio world. Head over to chestertonradio.substack.com. Read the stories.
Yeah, definitely read them.
If you are able, we ask you to support the station. Become a modern patron of the arts. Help keep the open door streaming 24/7 for everyone, regardless of where they are or what they can afford.
It makes the difference.
And please, share this deep dive with someone who still believes that stories can change lives. Someone who might need a reminder that their quiet, ordinary life actually matters immensely.
As we close our time by the fire, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
In an age where absolutely everything is recorded digitally, every click, every purchase, every location, but almost nothing is truly remembered, perhaps the most radical act of cultural rebellion you can perform today is to simply write down the story of someone who helped you and put it in a physical box for your grandchildren to find.
It's like finding a brass pocket watch in a drawer of dead smartwatches.
Exactly.
It proves that some things are built to last. Thank you for joining us by the fire today. Fading out from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas. Chesterton Radio Stories. Ideas wonder. The open door is always on.